Okay. So we are live now. Hello, everyone. It's like hard for me to sort of see what's going on. Besides, though, if you are watching, maybe put a little hello in the chat or in the live chat. But hello, everyone, and welcome to a virtual event. We are so excited to be doing our third event with Ashley Shuttleworth. Their debut novel came out. A little book called A Dark and Hollow Star. You might have heard of it. It came out, what was it, in 2020 at this point? About 2021. I read it in
2021.
Yeah, I read it in 2020, but it probably came out because I read an arc. It probably came out in 2020.
Sure, I've got one.
Extremely incredible urban fantasy novel that blew me away. And I was like, we have to do an event with Ashley because they're so cool. And this book is so cool. And now the sequel has released at last. You're in for a treat. Just look at just how long A Cruel and Faded Light is. And today they are joined by two other incredible authors. We have Liselle Sambury, who wrote Blood Like Magic as well. And the sequel has the sequel come on? I don't know. I've seen an arc at work.
August.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think my brain does not clock those things because of the publisher of the galleys that we get. And then of course we have Adrienne Tooley, who wrote
many things,
Magic and Sophie and the Bone Song, other excellent YA novels, YA fantasy novels. And the three of them are here to celebrate the release of Ashley's new novel. And we are so excited to have all three of you here. And I do want to preface this by saying that we are all devastated by what happened in Texas yesterday. And it is at the forefront of our minds. And we will always be, Buffalo Street Books, of course, will always be fighting for common sense gun reform. And our hearts are with those families and the victims and the people of Texas as well. So we did want to preface by saying that. But we do hope that if you are watching or if you're planning on watching this later, maybe, taking a break from the internet, we hope that this is a really fun event and, a way to sort of take your mind off of everything that's going on by talking about Nausicaa and all of the amazing characters. I have to say Nausicaa because she's my favorite. But
the other one.
Characters in books. So I'm going to hand it over to you three.
Thank you, Isabella. Marty, yay! Book chat.
Yeah, so excited about it.
Yeah, so I guess Isabella had already introduced. We're going to be chatting a bit about, celebrating I almost said A Dark and Hollow Star, whatever. This is like reliving my debut experience for the first time because the first time I wasn't allowed to go outside of my house. So we were all on lockdown. But this time I was able to go outside my house. So we're celebrating, A Cruel Faded Light. We're going to talk about other things, though, too, because I'm uncomfortable with every attention. I had a small panic attack in my car before the book signing the other day. I was like, okay, we can do this. We're going to talk to people, and we're going to go home, and we're going to nap.
It's hard to, suddenly do that. When you release your first book and everything was, virtual, to suddenly be okay, now go in a store with people that you maybe haven't seen in however many years, and just do this thing like normal.
Yeah.
It's almost like that debut panic all over again because you didn't have it that first time, and you're just like, wait, but this is my second time. I should feel better about this.
I think you did a sign because you just had Sophie come out, and you did a signing too, didn't you?
I did, and it was very surreal. It was the first time I'd ever signed my books in a bookstore, mostly because I'm way too chicken to go in and be like, can I sign a book? And I won't do it. So it was the first, I scheduled it, and I went in, and I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. This doesn't seem right.
This is weird.
Yeah, for the book police to come and escort you.
It's am I allowed? Can I?
No. vandalism, because that's been going on lately.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
How dare you? Okay, anyhow, not to get political, I guess.
Don't.
Vandalize my books. It just reminded me because when I used to work for a bookstore back when Breaking Dawn first came out, and I was in charge of sitting at the booth and handing out people's pre-orders because there were a lot of pre-orders. And I get all these people, they come up and they'd be like, can you sign my book? Because they thought I was the author, so I'd have to like let them down that I'm not Stephanie Meyer. Sorry.
that's
I'm not
amazing.
making millions of dollars to sit here and hand out Breaking Dawn to you.
I love the idea that somebody looked, because how old were you when that came out? That they like
I
looked
was
at you and they were like,
19. Yeah, I was 19 when that came out, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, sorry that I'm not Stephanie Meyer in this backwater farming town handing out your pre-order books.
It's hard to know though. Like when I was a teenager, I
Lesson,
never
right?
looked at what authors looked like. So
Yeah.
when I went to get my like Twilight book signed, I had no idea what Stephanie Meyer looked like. I was just like in line. I could have very easily been that person that was like,
Together.
"Is it you?"
Yeah, no. So this time I did get to be the author and sign books, which is cool. It just darkly reminded me of that. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna have to tell them I'm not the author. I'm just here to hand out your pre-orders.
you're like, wait a minute. So you held up a copy of the book a minute ago and it was thick. How do you distill that down into like a quick elevator pitch for like anyone who might be tuning in or someone who's like newer to the series? Like, how do you summarize and like talk about like the high level stuff that you're excited about in the sequel?
Why do you hate me? What? Literally, okay, so people like twice yesterday were like, what's your book about? And I'm like, why? Does it look like I know what my book is about? There wouldn't be 5 million pages if I knew what my book was about. The best that I have to tell you is that it is about gay fairies, and that's pretty much it. I had a really good elevator pitch for Dark and Hollow Star, and then people stopped asking me for a while what my book was about, so I never developed one for Cruel and Fated Light. So I just go back to it was about 4 queens who have like joined together to solve some crime that is happening in the courts of fairy. And that was something about it. Part two. They're still doing that. They're still solving crime, but now they're in Vegas and in a fairy palace.
There.
See,
So there we go.
There.
Perfect. Now I know.
Solving crime in Vegas in a fairy palace. There's some balls, a lot of death. Everyone keeps telling me they're very traumatized. I'm really sorry. This was written during the pandemic.
There you go.
I appreciated the trauma and being traumatized. That's what I enjoy in the book.
Nice
So,
to like feel seen by the content that you're consuming.
exactly.
I'm glad. I mean, it's not, I think I would hate it if people were like, this is funny. And I'm like, this is not supposed to be funny.
Wait a minute. How do you think that drafting during the pandemic like affected this? Do you think that you like let yourself like follow different like vibes or like emotions because of like the way that you were feeling?
Probably. So I wrote the first draft in like 3 months because I procrastinated and then had to do everything. Well, not really procrastinated because it was book 1 was coming out and I was dealing with that. And then, like you guys know, so the debut experience is really overwhelming. So the year before your book comes out, as a debut author, you're kind of scrambling and trying to do everything because you think everything you do matters. So you're trying to sign up for every interview and every chat and every promotion, marketing thing. And I was really overwhelmed with all that stuff. So I was trying to juggle that. And then in 2020, right when they were like, okay, maybe this is actually a problem with this people getting sick and stuff, that's when I actually sat down and started writing it. I was lucky in a way that for the first little while, my life wasn't impacted in the same way because I was an essential worker. I had to keep going to my public service job. And so I still had a routine. Whereas where everybody else was having their routines change dramatically, I still had a routine. It was exhausting because people are mean and nasty. And I'm very glad to be taking a step away from the public, to be perfectly honest, working with the public in that capacity. But it was actually pretty quick. And it wasn't until after I wrote my first draft that things started to set in. A lot of travel happened in this book. They go a lot of different places, and that's probably reflective of the fact that I couldn't go anywhere. But I mean, that's also natural progression of the story. It did, but there were a lot of, I miss going to this place, so we're gonna go. I did set a scene, a particular grotto scene in the Bruce Peninsula. It wasn't exactly the Bruce Peninsula in the book, but it was fashioned after the grotto in the Bruce Peninsula. I really liked going there, so that featured England, and yeah, they go places, so that kind of crept up in there. But no, it wasn't. Yeah, I was, I guess in a way, lucky because I got to finish the draft very quickly before I started getting tired and overwhelmed. But Celadon's point of view was added after the first draft. So all of his stuff, and then felt bad because it's like, I'm going through some stuff right now and I have to write the character that everyone was the most excited to read. So I was really worried that I'd let people down, but everyone's like, yay, Celadon! So I guess we dodged that bullet.
Yeah. I feel like it worked out really well. For sure. I was very happy with it personally. And like, what was that planning process like for you? Because you wrote it in 3 months. Like, did you have a lot of that pre-planned, or like some of it you kind of came up with on the fly, minus Celadon's POV that came after?
I do now outline. For A Dark and Hollow Star, I did not outline. I was very no beta. We die like Amazons. We don't have notes. We just go for it, and that was chaos. It was really hard to remember everything. So I do outline now, very extensively. I have binders worth of breakdowns of what every chapter is supposed to be, and then when I sit down, all of it gets scrapped. But I at least have a progression of how, like, the key points in the story, what I'm supposed to be writing about today. When I start writing, the previous chapter will alter the next chapter, so I'll just make little notes about what's going on or whatnot. It's usually the beginning is never what I planned in the book, and then the end is exactly as I planned it, so it's weird. But as Liselle, I forget your question.
Planning process.
Yeah, the planning process. So I did have the outline to follow for that, and that was good. Celadon I knew had to be added, but I was really scared because I already have 4 points of view, 5 technically, 6 almost, because the end is always a different person, and I have the interstitial chapters, which are by the villain, and then I have the actual 4 main characters. So there's a lot going on, and I was worried that it would add so much more length to my book and just kind of overwhelm people with different points of views. But in a lot of the talking with Sarah, who we've all worked with, when she suggested a certain plot point, it became that Celadon was just integral to the story. Like, it changed everything. Because I had never actually planned on that specific plot twist that I can't talk about, but it involves a certain relation with people that it changed everything. So he had to have his own point of view, and he gets a much bigger role in the story now, which definitely affects the next book. to talk about.
So speaking of the next book, you have 2 more books in this series that you have sold and you get to write and we get to read. How did knowing that and having that, like, those future 2 books affect, like, drafting this, revising this? Like, do you have like a notebook of like stuff for book 3, stuff for book 4? Like, how do you even go? My brain as a standalone fantasy writer is like, Ashley, what are you how are you doing this?
Yeah.
So when we first approached Sarah with this, this was always a 4-book series. So I did have to tell her, I did have to have a synopsis of what the whole story was about. The end was loose because obviously I went to this knowing that my book was going to change considerably. So it's like, here's some bullet points of what I want to happen in the end. And I had to have like 3 different plans, because here's the plan if this is only going to do well enough to sell the duology, in which case book 2 would get so much longer because I'd have to wrap everything up. Here's the plan if you only let me do 3 books, because trilogies are the most that publishers really do now. It's duologies is the big thing. And then here's the plan if I get to do all 4, what I really wanted. And book, so I did have kind of an idea, and then book 1 started doing well enough that we're like, okay, so probably I will get another one. So now I'm gonna expand a little based on what I think is gonna how I can end it in the book 3. And then Sarah's like, no, we're gonna push for 4 books, and you're gonna do this. And I'm like, yes, but inside I'm also crying because I want 4 books, and they're gonna be 6 pages because this is tiring. I'm sure Sarah's getting really tired of going through 700 pages to change all of my Canadian spellings to American. I do have, it changes a lot, but I do have the end was kind of what I came up with first when I was thinking about this story before I even wrote it down. The end I've always had the end goal, and everything was kind of working towards it. So I've been able to pull the threads along to that. I will say that when I was first on submission with this book, and all the editors that I submitted it to were like, I'm gonna pass because there's a lot going on in this book and I don't know how to deal with that for you. And at that time, I was like, I don't understand what's wrong with you. And I found Sarah, and Sarah's like, this is great. We're going to make this more complicated. I was like, good. Finally, someone is on the same page. And now I'm here. And I'm like, those editors knew what they were talking about.
Because it was originally one POV, right?
Yeah, it was originally
Yeah,
just a girl. It was a nice, happy little 80,000 words.
And they thought that was too complicated.
And they thought that was too complicated. And then Sarah's like, do you want to make it like a million point? No. Sorry, the million point of views is really mine. She wanted Nos. Specifically, she wanted Nos's point of view. And then she's like, I feel like we need to have the boys. And a touch on that, the boys were actually people of color. And I was really uncomfortable with making them point of view characters from that, so I had to completely change who they were, because originally Aurelian was Black and originally Van was Indian, and I didn't want to write point of view characters from that, since that makes up most of the representation is by white people doing that. So we had to change that entirely I had to completely scrap who those characters were and change them entirely. So that added like half a year onto that too, of that revision, to make it 4 points of view, all these characters. It grew, and then everybody's got their own point of view now, and that means everybody has a backstory. Van's was the hardest to pull through, because I had no concept of who this new Van was, and his was a little harder to work on. We did get there in the end. I love Van, but yeah, it just made the story get so complicated. And now I'm sitting here and I'm like, it's not hard to deal with because this is what I enjoy doing. I wouldn't do it any other way. But at the same time, I have to sit down when you're tired. And it's like, okay, a million things have happened right now. Let's continue on with this story in this vein. Yeah. So I understand now what they were talking about. Not that I would change my story for anything, but I understand now why those editors were like, we don't really know how to work with you on this. So we're very lucky that Sarah knew how to work with me on that. I'm glad that she knows how to juggle my stuff. But okay, so while we're talking about this topic, I'm gonna ask my questions to you guys because Adrienne, you are a standalone fantasy author, and Liselle and I write. Well, you now have a duology.
Yeah.
I'm real scared to write a sequel, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, teach me your ways, please.
So, and then all Liselle and I seem to do are write sequels and stuff. So it's coming at telling fantasy in a much different way. Adrienne, how was your experience of that now that you are starting to write a duology? What are your differences that you feel there between setting up a world for a fantasy world for a standalone versus for a continuing series?
That's such a good question. And I think that like when you're writing standalones, you have to pack as much information about this world as you can into one book without it feeling like info dumpy, throwing all this stuff at you. And you're just like, I can't keep track of the places and the things and the magic system and the characters. Like you only have like, I think Sweet and Bitter Magic and Sophie were both around 90,000 words each. So like, they're not big books. Like a Dark and Hollow Star could knock out Tamsin and Wren with a single hit. Like you just go bam and they're on the ground.
That was 164,000 words, I think, in the end.
So your debut novel was basically the size of like both of my 2 books so far. Like
I'm writing like 5 books in 1 year, guys.
Exactly. No, but like I think you have to be really intentional when you're building a standalone because you want the world to feel like fleshed out enough that you get everything out of it and you're not like, oh, I wish like I could see them go to this island you mentioned once, like in like, you know, bigger books. It's like, well, maybe they will. Maybe I'm planting the seeds of places that I'll get to explore further later, which is what I'm getting to do now. But like when you're working that standalone, you have to be very intentional about the stuff that you focus on and like the pieces of information that you're throwing in to like round things out versus like being able to set really like thoughtful, like sneaky clues in like a duology or a series where I'm like, okay, I've got things, I'll build on this in book 2. Like I've never gotten that experience before. So I'm like maybe having too much fun. I'm going to get to drafting my sequel and I'm going to be like, girl, what'd you do? But right now I'm feeling really excited about like, I feel like I got to take a little bit more time with the new book I'm drafting of like letting the world kind of sit and ruminate and like not feeling like I had to do so much because this is my only chance to write these characters in this place at this time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
With your book too about Sweet and Bitter Magic. I was like, every time people write like a standalone high fantasy, I'm like, all that world and then just gone after. I'm like, how can you do it?
Honestly,
you gotta write about it. You're sick of it, and then
it is like a little bit of like a mourning of like leaving. Like I did it, I built it, and now it's just like goodbye. Like have fun over there. Like and I wonder, like turning that question back over to the both of you, like how do you go about like world building, whether it's high fantasy or like Liselle, yours is almost like kind of like future fantasy. Like how do you go about like planting those seeds and like what do you put in book 1 versus book 2? How do you decide what to save and what to kind of like reveal from the beginning?
Yeah. I don't know how this process is for you, Ashley, but like I have to think about them both as soon as possible. And Blood Like Magic was drafted very chaotically. I planned very little. I thought I planned things. I wasn't good at planning. Most of the world building was done completely on the fly. I had to make up rules as I was making the world and then like defy rules and fix rules and do all this stuff that I'm like, would never do. I would try not to do to myself again. Don't always succeed, but try to. And then like at a certain point with the first book, I started thinking about what the sequel could be. And I had a pretty strong idea of that, such that I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen in the first book, and this is what the second book will like jump on as. And so I very much world build like as is. I'm like, what do I need right at this very moment? And what am I pretty sure I'll need in this time, but I'm not 100% sure of it. And so my planning is perhaps a little more chaotic than I would like it to be ideally. I'm trying to get better at that going forward because it is really difficult. And so what really helped me is I like tried to draft Blood Like Fate as like fast as humanly possible. So I was still working on Blood Like Magic when I had finished a draft of Blood Like Fate. So then there were certain things that I could like go in and I could tweak really fast so that it worked for the second book. So I was like, oh, right,
You're
I
amazing.
can't do this magic thing if they're still doing this magic thing. And so I was like, okay, I can like tweak it, or I at least had it planned so that I could like fix up little things to make sure both books worked. And so now like when I plot series, I try and plot it together to make sure that I know what I need, because it's really difficult to like plan all the seeds, which is why I'm very much in awe of you, Ashley, because there's so much to keep track of and so many things to like check up on and like make sure things go together. And I find that to be really difficult, because that's like, to me, that's a hard bit of series, and that's kind of why it was nice to then later hop into standalone, because I was like, yay, I don't need to.
Yeah, you're doing the reverse of what Adrienne's doing.
Yeah. It's like, I don't need to make this work. And also I made sure it was not as much world building, or I tried to. I thought I was going to, but it turns out, you know, the haunted houses can have a lot of rules that you didn't think they could have.
I'm so excited for I'm so excited, Liselle. I'm so excited.
I'm happy.
But I love that idea of like finding what serves your book immediately, like what serves this right now. And I think that's actually really good advice, whether you're outlining or drafting chaotically, like I think a lot of us do. I love the idea of like what serves me and my characters right now. What can I save? I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I wish that I could do that the way that you did that. Because it's kind of similar. It's like, I'm so impressed you can remember things. Tara remembers things. I had a street team this time for my to help with promotion and stuff, which was amazing. I loved them. They were very sweet. When they started reading the arcs of the book, it's like, I'm on this chapter and I can't believe XYZ happened. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I started listening to my audiobook the other day because it's incredible. I just have to say. And they're talking about they're reading the words that I wrote. These are words that I wrote. And I'm like, did I do that? Good for me. So what I do is I make my outline, which again is very in-depth. I do it immediately, or as immediately as possible after I'm finished my copy edits of my previous book, so that the world is fresh enough in my head. Things get deleted immediately.
Fair.
It allows me to let go of things, so that when I sit down and I write a chapter, I can focus entirely on that chapter. And then next day pick up again. I really enjoy world building though. So I think that's just how I carry it all in my head. I live in this world, and when you live in it enough, it becomes your entire personality. So this is all my head is empty. All that's going on in there is my book. That's all I got going on. No thoughts, just vibes up there. And I guess that's how I juggle all of it. I do miss a lot of things the first time through. So like my first draft will just be, here's this. And then people who are reading it will be like, didn't you do this time or whatever? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I believe you. I think there's a ring at the end of the first book that is a pretty important clue to things that are going on, and I forgot about that ring entirely. And my dad was like, then I remembered and was like, oh right, so we're giving that to the second book again, I guess. Which, they're just, small things that you forget about. It does actually require me to force myself to sit down and read my book again, which is both the hardest thing that I have had to do. And you know what? A year after it's out, I'm not quite as hard on it. So I'm sitting here like, oh, this is cute. This is fun. And I'm remembering all the things that I liked about it. So it's good. When it first comes, I can't read this sort of Cruel and Fated Light, but we'll get there eventually. But yeah, that helps me carry things over, I guess.
Yeah. That's the thing about a sequel, is that against your wishes, you will eventually be forced to, if you have not a great, I also have a terrible memory, and I'm the same. Like, I got my copy editor's notes, and they list all the characters in your book and stuff like that. And I looked at it and I was like, don't know who that person is.
Yeah. They sent me that at first. I don't know, Adrienne, because this is your first time doing a duology. So your editor should, but they have, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically a document of a glossary for you. It's like, here's your character names, here's what's going on in this place. And they sent me that the first time. I was like, I don't know what this is, so I'm not going to read it. It seems like a lot of words. I'm not going to do it. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. Heart. Bye. And
then never open it.
Sarah, please don't watch this. And then I opened it and I was like, wait a minute. The whole time I was sitting here on social media being like, God, I wish I had a Wikipedia page for my stuff. And Sarah was just crying in the background, being like, I have that. I gave that to you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's full of information. It's like an amazing world building Bible that you didn't have to make yourself.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It's very nice of them. And I'm like, oh. It's to help the copy editors and stuff, because they'll go through and they'll be like, do you, like, this word is supposed to be capitalized, but you didn't do it here. Do you want that? Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a running glossary for the editors too. And that
makes sense.
They pass it on to you as well. So I can remember every time that I use the immortal realm that it is actually capitalized.
Capitalized.
So, like, did you do that? Sure. Okay. And now I'm stuck with it. It was I ran a character, Cerulean, Celadon's older brother. His name was originally spelled with a C, and then they just randomly changed that to S. And I was like, okay, I guess. What I'm not okay. So then it was just really, so I'm like, did you guys just feel like I have too many C name characters? Because my agent already yelled at me for having too many A name characters, and I had to change that. And she's like, is it because your name's Ashley? I'm like, don't judge me. Yes. They're all gonna have A names. Don't talk to me.
Don't talk to me.
And then I was like, why do I do this? And I look at my friend group, and everybody, like, so many people in my life, their names start with J. And I'm like, I guess I do this honestly.
Fair enough. It's just the way it is.
Is there an old name you remember that changed?
Maybe.
You're like,
who was it? I think Rory's name changed. Arlo's dad. I think he had a different name. I think Thallow's name was a different name, actually. Because I remember having to change her name. They were just kind of like side characters, because I had a lot of C names and a lot of A names. And then apparently a lot of C names. But it wasn't, they weren't anyone to, like, Arlo's name was always Arlo, and Nausicaa's name was always Nausicaa, and Bayan and Aurelian. The main people stayed the main people. Celadon was always Celadon. Celadon wasn't originally older though. He was aged down to be Arlo's age in this one.
Do you have a name creation picking process?
Good question.
I use a lot of baby name websites, and I'm like, what do I like? Or it's like, I'm not very clever. Arlo's name was chosen because I wanted her to have a more masculine name. I don't really like gendered names. So I wanted her to move away from things that were very feminine, and I just wanted her to have a neutral name. But like all of the Viridians have names that are named after the color of green or blue or spring. Like, it wasn't very in-depth. So I was like, Celadon and Australia is spring, and then there was Cerulean. They were just
I didn't notice that at all though.
Yeah, they're all spring names or relating to spring, or the colors of the scale blue. For whatever reason, I liked blue better than I liked green, even though that's the court color. And then obviously the light fairies had names that stemmed from words or names that meant variations of light or summer. Yeah, no. If I like a name, I'll be like, oh, this is fun. I'm gonna name this person this. And they're fairies. They don't have to have complicated names. I named someone Bluebell. Like, you're just the fairies. They like nature. It's good.
That's legitimate.
Right.
Adrienne, do you have a name picking convention?
That's a good question. I'm like, now I'm trying to think, like, where did these names come from? I have no idea. You know what I do? I recycle names for my books from like old like drafts of completely different books. Like I had like I stole in Sophie, I don't know how I picked her name. She was just always Sophie to me. But like I stole Lara, who's the love interest, from like a draft of a book or like a draft of a story I'd been working on. And in that story, it was Lara and Sabine. And I stole Sabine for the third daughter, which I'm working on now. So like I don't know where they originally come from, but I write them and then I take them out of old stories that won't ever go anywhere and I put them into my new ones. I'm like, this will work. This will do. Like
yes.
But I feel like every time I go to like a baby name generator, I'm always like, well, I'm not gonna name my character Amy. Like I feel like I never get the like good like fantasy baby name generator. So I'm like, what do I do with a Rachel? It just doesn't seem right here.
The Amy's and Rachels of the book world crying.
Sorry.
That's legitimate. That makes sense.
Yeah. What about for you? Do you have like a cool way about name? Teach me.
Mine are very like either or. Either head empty, I've created something like Voya I just thought of, or I'm very specifically and obsessively choosing a name. And it's like one or the other. It cannot be both. Either I couldn't care less or I care very intensely. And it is in fact basically a plot point and it must be that way. And it's been that for like my third book, like the main character is named Daisy. It's very intentional. Her mom has this whole thing about her name that's like maybe a lie and maybe it's not. And that says a lot about her mom, that she might lie about something as like commonplace as like what she chose to name her child. And like there's a whole like mini prologue about her name and the story of her name. And then she's also very rough around the edges. And she's like kind of a bitch. And then she's got this soft, pretty, gentle name. And it's not really representative of who she is as a person. And so like that I thought really intensely about. But Voya, I was like, this name sounds cute. Name is Voya. That's it.
Just completely opposite sides.
Yeah. Completely
I love
different.
that.
There was Adrienne, you said something. I was like, oh, I do that too, but I can't remember what it is now. Good.
Do you steal from yourself?
Yes, that was it.
Yes.
That was it. I stole from myself. Nos.
What did you steal?
Nos. Nos was from a different story where she was still entirely Nos. Like her character was
character was the same.
But she was a mermaid. And I loved her. I loved her very much, clearly. Celadon also was already a fleshed out character, and he happened purely coincidentally, and he was Nos's best friend. And I couldn't not make him into the story because I loved him too much. Same with Elias, actually. His nephew, Arlo's cousin, the young one. They're all recycled people. Aurelian and Vayan also were recycled people, but Vayan was dead in that book.
Oops.
So yeah, I had no backstory for his character, none whatsoever. He was a past tense. And I tell people, they're like, not my favorite boy, not my gumdrop buttons. Yeah. So
This is why everyone should keep a cut file. This is why you should always keep everything you write. It's not a waste. My one and only, what's your best writing suggestion? Don't throw anything away because you will absolutely want to steal from yourself later. I promise you.
Yeah.
Words you wrote, you're like, God, I need something.
Right.
And I find actually, because when I'm starting my first draft of a new story, I will often delete the first 50,000 words about 10 times. I have to find the perfect way to start my story, or my brain will not move on from it. Which is half of the reason why I've cried to Sarah 20 times about this book needing an extension, because I have deleted the prologue for book 3 about 20 times over the period of 6 months. And I have what I want now, but there's a sacrifice. And it's a lot of times, a lot of writing. But I keep that because I find I write very emotionally. And once I express something, I can't access that again. So in a previous story a long time ago that I wrote, there was this scene about grief that I wrote, and I can't pull that out again. So I kept that because I can draw off of that. But once I pull something, it's very hard for me to do again. So it was really hard, actually, because the first book stemmed from, the prologue stemmed so intensely from anger. It was hard again because the second book had to start from a place of even deeper anger. Really hard for me to pull that out again. I did have to. There was a lot of stuff going on. I think that was when I was writing the prologue for that one is actually when all of that Kavanaugh cases were going on. So there was a lot of fuel for that back. But if I don't have something like music, and it has to be something attached to a video game, to be perfectly honest, because that's how I access my emotions.
Interesting.
Playing it out. So if I have music that ties to a scene, then I can remember how that feels. So I can put myself in that headspace to write that. It's very tiring to be in that headspace, but I do tend to keep a lot of the stuff that I've cut, because I do find if I need that emotion again, I need to refer to something previously from that.
That's so interesting.
Cool. That is super interesting. Which, this ties neatly into a question I had about, the things that were inspiring you when you were writing A Cruel and Fated Light, which I assumed Final Fantasy would be included, but additional things, whether it's books or movies or video games or music, or what sort of things were inspiring you during that time?
What happened during... Obviously, Final Fantasy VII happened during Cruel and Fated Light, and I know that you guys don't play Final Fantasy, but Final Fantasy VII is my end-all and be-all. It's my reason for existing. This is my game. And, that game came out, and I was not talking to anybody. But I have a book to write, so I beat and platinum that game. Thank you very much. In 2 weeks. And then,
Oh gosh.
and then I had to dive into writing. But video games are a big wellspring of inspiration for me because it's a very tactile world. I can be in these fantasy worlds, and I find that really helps me world build. I like Zelda the most for that because Zelda is very most of the games are getting like this now, but you can interact with pretty much everything around you. If I want to go and climb that rock, I can go and climb that rock. And I don't know, it really helps you play out a scene for things. Fighting, adventuring. A lot of things are emotional anymore. So it's like you can cry about this scene, so you can listen to this music later and be sad again, and then you can write about it. But I think there were some core things like Hades came out, that video game came out, which I'm sure you guys saw. That artwork was going around everywhere because it was a game that had all of the hot Greek people. So that's actually helped with a lot of book 3. There's a lot of Hades vibes in book 3, to be honest, because that's when we start meeting a lot of the gods. But yeah, no, I can't remember. There are some specific things that happened influential wise, but I do draw. I couldn't read very much. Often, a lot of times I will get, obviously, as a writer, inspiration from reading, but the last couple of years were very hard for me to write. I only write a few books a year. This has been the first year that I've actually been able to read things. And I mean, it's traumatic. There was a lot that went on in my personal life in when I was writing A Cruel and Fated Light. So that's probably why that a lot of that has transferred into the emotional, traumatic aspect of it. But yeah, for the most part, music and video games are what inspire my world building. Liselle, what about you?
Oh gosh. I was like listening. I'm like, oh, the answer something.
The answer something.
Yeah, I mean, music. I make a playlist now for all of my books, and so I'm regularly pulling up the playlist and listening to it and like thinking about it, especially like for certain scenes, like in Blood Like Fate, there's a sort of like dance type scene. And it's one of those kind of like romantic-ish scenes, which I always struggle with because I get embarrassed very easily. And so when I do my first draft, it's like almost completely bereft of any cute romantic scenes because I'm too embarrassed. So I have to do it in subsequent drafts. And so I knew that I wanted to have this like cute dancing moment scene, but the first time I wrote it, I couldn't do it. I was too embarrassed. And then I like heard a specific song and I was like, this would be so great for the scene. So then when I went to write that scene, the next time when I was not so embarrassed, I then listened to it and I like got myself into the mood and I like pictured it and like what it might look like as like a visual scene. And then I was like, okay, now I can write it. And then I went and I wrote the cute little scene and I moved on with my life. So yeah, usually like music is really helpful for me in that way of like getting ideas. And then like depending on the book and the subject matter, I'll also like watch movies and shows and things like that. Like my third book is horror, and so more of that I was like, I'm gonna watch a bunch of haunted house movies and things like that. And so that was a little bit more relevant. But for Blood Like Fate, because it was a sequel and it's like I already have the first book and it was more like a music thing because I'm really playing in my already existing sandbox. A sequel very much, I don't know if you have this feeling, but to me it feels very much like writing fan fiction for my own book. It's just like, let me play in the world I already have, and like I'll do all these things with the characters and
more high stakes.
Feel real.
Yeah. I'm letting down more people now.
That's the thing. I'm like,
man, the first book.
Yeah, I'm like, that's what I'm like. I have to think about the least. I can't think too much about disappointing people because then I'll just freak right out. But that was me during the like most of the beginning of the sequel process, like overthinking about what people will think about it. And then I was like, I have to pull away from it because I can't predict what you want. So you're gonna get what I plan to give you, and hopefully you like it. And there it is. But yeah, music is always really big.
That's such a healthy mindset. I can't control it. You're just going to give it to you and I'm going to hope that you take it.
Yeah. I had to get to that though. That was like I
Oh,
care
yeah.
so much, I care so much, and then I was like, I can't. I just whatever. I'm sorry to you. I love you, readers, but no,
Yes.
just gonna write it. I don't care what you think at this junction, and I will care later.
Good for you.
Fantastic.
Good for you. Adrienne, you had you made your own, you and your wife made a playlist or like a CD type of thing for yours. I
We did.
imagine music must be a huge inspiration for your writing.
Yes. So with Sophie, I originally was like, because in the book I wrote the lyrics and like the songs in the book because she writes music. And I originally was like, I'm gonna like write the songs to music and record them. And then I was like, no, I'm not. Like, that is so much work. Are you joking? So instead I was thinking about like, okay, this book is so like music centric. And like, I'm one of those people that like, when I find like the vibe or like the album that I want to listen to, I listen to it like 1,000 times. So like my Spotify Wrapped are not fun because my top artists and like, it's just whatever I was listening to while I was drafting. So I just like blasted the Phoebe Bridgers record when I was working on Sophie, just like 1,000 times. Like my Spotify Unwrapped was just Phoebe Bridgers. Like what, it was like not fun. I was like, I can't share this. No one cares. It's just the record track list. Like, but I get so like, okay, like I don't even have to listen anymore. Like my body like knows it. So like a little bit of like how you're saying, Ashley, like, oh, it's like making me think of this emotion, or like Liselle, like, oh, this is the song that I could write that scene to. It's like a little bit like at some point it just like gets in my bones and I'm like, okay, I can just like shut it all out and like there's something happening, but I'm not even really listening anymore. So I've been kind of figuring out what it is for my new book. I'm still sort of like, I haven't like fully settled on it yet of like, what's my weird record I'm going to wear out? Cause it's different for every book. Exactly. So it's like, but like, then after I've drafted the book and like worked on the book, then I'm like, okay, now I can make a playlist because like I know what the book is. So now I can be like this song and then this, and it's like the journey. So it's like helping me like remember what I've done a little bit. But yeah, music is super important. But I do dabble in like TV shows and movies. I don't really read when I'm on a deadline, like too much. And if I do, I usually read like really outside the genre just because like my weird brain will like latch on to things and I don't ever want to like do that. So like my favorite thing is like when I press send on a deadline, I have a deadline on Thursday when I have like a stack of books I'm ready to read because I'm like, I'm done. I can do this. I have 2 weeks to read as many things as I can before I have to jump on and just start doing something else.
Yeah. I find that too. I can't read something unless it's specifically like my voice. I find that actually like, fortunately, Cassandra Clare keeps me in my own voice. And Sarah Maas keeps me in my own voice, but only the Throne of Glass. I can't read first person books when I'm drafting. They have to be third person because I write in third person and it really throws me off when I'm reading something else and writing something.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. But Liselle, what you had mentioned about you can't write your cute romantic scenes. It's so hard. I come from a background of like pretty smutty fan fiction. Like I had no problem writing about this when my name was not attached to it.
It's different.
It's different. And now and now people have to judge me on it. Like professionally have to judge me on how my kissing scenes go. And then my grandparents and great uncles and entire family will get together at Christmas time and, you know, bless them for supporting me. But there's a whole fucking PowerPoint about my books and stuff at Christmas time, and they put on all of my interviews, and I can't handle this that you guys are going to be reading about.
It's both so sweet and terrifying.
Legit.
Like, they're like, look at, we're watching all your interviews together. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad you guys are not in the same country as me. very deeply touched because they're gonna watch this at Christmas time too. I love you guys very much. Thank you. But it's like the knowledge that my grandmother is sitting here probably listening to the audiobook to my aunt, listening to the audiobook on the way to visit my grandmother, and they're gonna be reading about all my people kissing. And I'm like, so this is very intimidating. And then Sarah's like, I remember there was like a kissing scene. She's like, this is great, but this makes it seem like she's kissing a dog. And I'm like, oh no. Everything I know about myself is a lie. So it's very hard. Because on a very serious note, a lot of the Hollow Star series has been a wish fulfillment of writing a fantasy story that centered queer kids in the same way that not queer kids have been featured through every fantasy story. And there aren't too many young adult traditionally published fantasy books that feature sapphic spice in all of its Sarah Maas glory. And I very deeply want to do that. So that has been a big part of book 3, is trying to work that in. And I'm like, old me can do this so easily. Old me's got like 50,000 files on her computer that we're not ever going to show anybody. But writing this for someone to read with my name attached to it has been okay.
You need to extract a family promise where you just say, these pages not allowed, not for you.
Not allowed to
you
read.
Don't get it.
After. There's gonna
Stick
be
those pages together.
I was gonna say
get
some tape, send some personalized family copies where you just glue those pages together. You go from page 125 to 300. You just leave those where they are.
You just leave, no, it's intimidating, but I really want to attempt to do it. We'll see how it goes. Again, if I didn't have my name attached to it, I wouldn't be worried. And know that I have to read this with editors like 20 times after. I just give so many props to the romance writers. So many props. Everybody has to sit and judge how you write kissing scenes. And spice. Spice is the word now. I come from the lemon and the lime and the grapefruit age category.
Of citrus themed.
Yeah, the citrus scale, if you will. But it's spicy now, so but yeah, I really, Arlo and Nos deserve some fun, but and I deserve the chance to write it, but oh my god.
On that note,
hi Isabella.
Hi. It was such a wonderful conversation. Like, it's like getting up to like put something away. It's like listening to a podcast like that. It's just so great. It's so great. So I do have like a couple of audience questions. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I've got 2 that I'd like to ask. So one person asked, you alluded a little bit to the fact that you're able to read now. But what are all of you reading? All of you, not just Ashley, but what are you all reading right now?
Wait, well, we were talking about this before we started the live chat. Currently, I'm reading I don't even know what one it's called, what is it called? But the one of the series of Cassandra Clare's overarching series, that's the Lady Midnight one. I like that one.
Oh, the Dark Artifices.
Yeah. What is that one?
The Dark Artifices, I think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what I'm reading right now. And then I just discovered and then plowed through the entirety of the Shatter Me series, which I liked because finally we picked the shitty blonde boy that I did not think that she would pick. Because I never get to have the awesome YA books where we pick the villain. Finally. That's all I wanted.
Amazing.
A lot of my own series is gonna make sense now that you've heard me say this. I just want someone to pick the villain.
It's all coming together. You can see the threads.
Why? Okay, that's what I'm reading.
Oh, fantastic. I'm reading Gutter Child by J.L. Richardson. I've been meaning to read it for so long. It's like how to say, like, I guess it is like considered a dystopian novel, YA novel, about these divisions and these like gutter children, and then these like mainlanders, and very much like a system of enslavement that very much tries to present itself as something different, in a very insidious way. So I'm reading that one, and did I start something in audio? I don't think I did. I really like, I always read like one physical book or ebook and then also an audiobook at the same time. But I just finished one. I just finished Kiss and Tell by Adib Karam. That's the like boy band one where he's in a boy band. He recently broke up with his boyfriend, and then you're like following them as like they're on the road, and it's really cool. It's like this mixed format. So there's like interviews, and there's like little like social media tidbits and like text messages and stuff like that. And it was really like cool. It was really fun. It like brought up some really like great topics too, and like it was a fun time. Great in audio. Awesome.
Should read more fun books.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
It's not all about death.
It's not all about... Don't judge me.
I'm on...
me. I know what I'm about.
I can't say anything. I'm honestly the same. I'm just like, it was really out of left field for me, but it was fantastic.
It's nice. You need that once in a while. You need outside of your genre reads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on deadline right now, so I'm not like reading anything currently because I simply cannot. But the last book I read before I got my edit letter, I read Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. It is a book about a pandemic, drafted during the pandemic, published during the pandemic, and I thought, like, I don't know, but it was so cathartic. I cried like 15 times. It was the fastest. I like inhaled it in like a night, and it just like very deeply touched me. I loved it. I have a giant stack of books that I want to pick up as soon as this is in on Thursday. I want to read some like fun, happy books. So like I Kiss Shara Wheeler and She Gets the Girl are at the very top of my list as soon as this started.
I Kiss Shara Wheeler and which one?
She Gets the Girl.
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha.
Which one? This is all I want to read right now.
I have that one too.
Middle grade book in so long, but we're gonna when I'm done drafting too.
Yeah, so also good. I'm very excited to read Sea of Tranquility. It is on my. Oh, actually, I sent it back home, backing everything up. But it is like one of the books that I'm very excited to read as well. It's always like so fun to hear what everyone's reading because it always makes your list grow.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay, one more question. Someone asked, actually I'm gonna open it up to all of you, since you've all read the book. Who my favorite character is. Jeez, that was took me a minute to get that out. Ashley, like, who is your favorite character? Like, and is your favorite character to write maybe like the same as your favorite character, perhaps as a reader? And like now that you're like reading or listening to your book, and Liselle and Adrienne, like, who's your favorite character perspective to read from?
I think Riadne and Lethe are actually my favorite characters. I was so excited to write this book because Riadne has been very crucial to the story this entire time. And telling her story was very important. And I was just so excited because I like villains and I like to write about people who are viewed as villains until you get to know where they're coming from, and that doesn't change the fact that they're still doing awful things. But I don't know, I really like setting those things up. I don't know. I enjoy playing with those characters, and there's a lot about Riadne. Pardon?
I said you do such a good job of it too.
There's a lot about Riadne that rings true. And there's one of the beautiful people in my street team has taken upon themselves to do, because she's a psych major, and on TikTok she does all of these breakdowns of the mental health development and representation in Dark and Hollow Star. And I'm sitting here and I was like, oh my god, I need to go to therapy or something. I'm sorry. But it's very nice. It's very interesting to see that the points that I'm trying to convey in each of my characters, which are very meticulously chosen and crafted. I am very intentional with every single thing that I do with these characters. So Riadne was a very important character for me to write. She represents a lot about female power in a way that we deserve both the representation of good and bad. I think that's an important portrayal. Lethe is everything that is toxic and terrible, and I'm going to love him anyhow. I'm so sorry to everyone who doesn't like Lethe, because I am attracted to one type of person, and that person is prevalent in Nos, that person is prevalent in Riadne, that person is prevalent in Lethe. They are toxic people. Nos in a different way, but yeah. But my favorite one to write is Nos. Because she speaks the closest to how I do naturally. She's pop culture references that are way outdated because she's old. And she's very easygoing. She's very hostile, aggressive, all these things that they come very naturally to me and how I speak.
That's why I like her the most too.
I was going to say, Nos is my girl. That's
funny.
Yeah.
And I'm glad. It was very amusing to me that of all of the people in this book, Nos is the one that talks like a teenager. Even though Nos is like a few hundred years old, she has the closest, because Arlo's been raised in palace standards. Van's been raised palace standards. Raylan palace standards. Selon palace standards. Like, they all have very proper English. And there's Nos, who is just everything. She likes this stuff. So, and she makes video game references and things, which are the only thing I know how to talk about. Talk about your book. I don't want to talk about my book. I want to talk about Final Fantasy. And Nos gets that.
Nos is a perfect outlet for it.
What's your book about? I don't know. Here's the whole plot of Final Fantasy, though.
What about you, Liselle?
No, it's amazing. I love Nos. Nos is my queen, 100%. But I do really like reading from Arlo's POV. I feel like I'm just like, oh, sweet summer child, you don't know what's happening. You don't understand what's going on. You're so, like, I love that you think the best about people, but you're wrong, and it's okay. You'll figure it out eventually. But I appreciate, you feeling like that and thinking like that. I really love reading from her POV in that way, because, kind of how things are going on. But I also feel like she knows a lot more than people sometimes give her credit for, and is aware of a lot more things than sometimes characters give her credit for. And I also like seeing that from her POV, because she is noticing, and sometimes she notices things that other characters aren't noticing at all. So I do really like reading from her POV.
Arlo was very easy for me to write too. All of my characters are very easy for me to write. In the very sad reality that I use a lot of very personal things to write who they are as a character. Arlo is a very naive person who's been very sheltered her whole life. She's a good heart. She's a good person. She's my flower girl. She's my Aerith of the series. She's very sweet, but she's not like, she has fire in her and she can fight, but her whole life she's been taught to be seen and not heard, and that she's not valued by her society. And the best part, I think, of the series, just everyone's like, why is she the main character? Why is this, like, you've got all these characters, why is Arlo the main focus? Arlo is the whole point of this book, and that's why her character arc always mirrors Nos's, which people will start to see. Like, I'm living in book 3, so I already know, like, I can all these things are happening, and everyone for the longest time was just living in book 1. Arlo and Nos are extreme parallels of each other, which I think is finally conveyed by the end of book 2. You can maybe see what's starting to happen with the two characters. Arlo has a great arc I personally enjoy, and it's so much fun to write this person who is learning a voice that's very steeply stemmed in repressed anger. So it'd be fun to play with. I'm glad that people enjoy reading her. She's my very sweet summer child. And oh boy, you're going to be excited for book 4.
I haven't even gotten book 3.
Oh, there though.
And you're already teasing us about book 4. And Adrienne, you said Nos too is your favorite character.
Yeah, I love my girls.
So funny, because I was the most scared about Nos. I did not think I wrote Nos because I wanted there to be a character that was a female version of all the people like Jace was, Deadpool, all these really cool badass guys, and I want that. That's who Nos was fashioned after. But we're very hard on girls. We're very hard on female characters. Guys can literally exist with dark hair, and there's a whole fan group for them. But women must have substance. Nos does not have substance. Nos is video games and killing people. She has got a lot of substance. That's what I was scared about. So when I first wrote this book, it was only Arlo's point of view. You only got to see Nos from Arlo's point of view, which was the image she presents to people. All thoughts. I mean, all thoughts. She is all thoughts. All vibes and no thoughts. And then my editor really wanted Nos because even though I thought nobody would like Nos, everybody liked Nos. And it became a problem because then my editor was like, we need a point of view. And I'm like, you do realize that Nos is really traumatized, and her point of view is not going to be funny like her image she presents. She's going through things. That was her part of the story. But it was very important that Nos got a point of view, which I totally agreed with, because if we're going to have the parallel of the two characters, you do need to see the parallel. And the prologue was always from Nos's point of view. That had always existed. So we're like, run with that, continue with that. It works for the point of view. I mean, it works for the prologue, so keep going. And it was good. People responded well to it. So I think Nos represents something very real to people. I think a lot of us hide behind humor and quippy remarks and video game references, and inside we're dying. But it's a very important representation of a coping mechanism that I wanted to touch on. I'm glad people like Nos because I was very worried about Nos. And then people liked Nos too much. And then I was writing book 2 and I had like a cry about it. Because it's like, Sarah, who's my editor, what if people don't like Nos because I wrote her and now I have to write her again? And what if I forgot who Nos is? Yeah. All of them. No panic.
It worked out.
It worked out.
Gosh.
I love all of my characters immensely. It's very fun to write all of them. I'm very, just touches my heart when people are like, yay, I like this character for the XYZ reason. It touches my heart extra more when like the 2 people are like, oh my God, yeah, Lethe. And I'm like, yeah! 2 people are going to be really excited for how this series is going. They're all important, which is why my book is so long. All of them have their own stories.
Our inventory manager had a lot of books to process when they took up like a whole cart when like the first batch came in. It was so funny. It was so great because like I was like, I know you, and I'm like, oh, that's just like I'm just so happy for them. Like
they're tired.
Gets to take up this much shelf space. I've heard all about the shelf space issues.
Just increasing power, greater size, greater power.
Well, there's the thing in my brain. I'm like, every book must be longer. Why would you write a next book that is shorter? But right now, I'm seriously considering telling you guys it's going to be 6 pages, and you can just be happy about that.
Book 3 is a novella, actually.
It's a novella, and I'm disabling the comments. No one talk to me. No, it's very long. There's a lot going on. I have so much going on. I'm so sorry. Again, mostly to myself. I'm mostly sorry to myself. And Sarah.
It's really mostly to yourself. Because the rest of us are like, yay.
What?
I said it's really mostly to yourself because the rest of us are like, yay.
Yay. Yeah. At this point, the people who are still reading are the ones that like me being very just verbose. They just got a lot to say. But it's a process. And again, I am old and you can't teach me new things. So I write my Canadian things and my Canadian words and my editor because they have to be changed to American with my American publisher. So my editor has to do all of that. So thank you, Sarah, for reading all of going through every line of 700 pages to be like, we don't have a hydro bill. What do you mean you don't have a hydro bill, America? Get a hydro bill.
Yeah. All the things that you don't know are very specifically Canadian until you try and put it in the book. People are like, what is that?
What is
like,
that?
oh.
She's like, I had to Google what this is. What? What do you, does it, no, I still don't believe that. Is it hydro bill for you guys?
I don't even know what
you don't know what that means. All right, people have a hydro bill.
I'm like, how do you pay for energy? The
energy bill.
It could just be that
it's not water and it's not gas.
No. Yeah, I think I don't know what it is. All I know is that I pay it. It's like we had to Google this. Well, good for you. Sorry.
Yeah. Really, it's enriched education.
Oh, I think maybe we just call it our water bill.
No, we have a water bill. Do not have a water bill? No, no, it's hydro, isn't it?
Yeah.
Water is water and electricity. Is it not? It's like a combination.
Yeah, well, we pay like a water bill, like an electricity bill, but
we just with a bill. Is hydro, and I pay money to them.
So at the end of the day, like my makeup is like starting to.
Yes, I can release you guys. And we've been talking for like.
My computer's about to die.
Well, I want to thank you,
well, Adrienne. You guys,
if I disappear,
I'm like being willing to go over and like have longer conversation because it's so great. Oh goodness. It's okay. I almost don't want people to watch this back. It's like I'm having a crisis.
Sorry.
But thank you so much to Liselle and Adrienne for being here, along with Ashley for the release of
I'm sorry.
Thank you, everyone. Order the book from Buffalo Street Books.
Yes, please order it.
Good night, everyone.
Hollow Street.